Are you an artist who's looking to dramatically improve the quality of their work and thereby increase the number of sales they achieve? Well, if you are, I believe that the most effective and easiest way that you can have a noticeable difference in the quality of your work and the response to your work from the public is by improving the composition. Now, what do I mean by composition? Well, simply put, composition refers to the way in which we arrange the various marks and elements on our page or on our canvas. If we do it well, we create a visual dance for the viewer's eye, where we kind of reach out, we stop them in their tracks, we draw them in, and their eye engages in a visual dance with the work. If we do it poorly, the paintings become just like visual wallpaper. Even if the person happens to notice it, they'll glance at it and their eye will just move on into something that's more interesting. Now, how and why does all of this work? Well, it turns out that over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, our eyes and our brains have been hardwired to respond in certain very predictable ways to certain visual cues. And we can use that to choreograph that dance around the painting with the viewer's eye. Now, the simplest way I can explain this is with X's and arrows. So if I were to draw an arrow pointing to the right, your eye would automatically follow that arrow and go right out of the page. But if I were to put an X just at the end of the arrow, then your eye would be drawn to the right and it would stop at the X. And that's what composition is all about. The various elements that we put on our page can be used to move the eye in certain ways and can also be made to stop the eye. And that's what we want to do in our painting. We want to draw the viewer in, create that movement, have areas for it to rest, create one clear center of interest. And if we do all this properly, that will really engage the viewer. You see, certain types of marks are directional, and we can use those to move the viewer's eye wherever we like. And other types of marks stop the viewer's eye, and we can use that to draw and hold the viewer's attention. And that's why arrows are on highway signs telling us where to go, and that's why X marks the spot on a pirate map. Now, if you don't know me, haven't seen me before, my name's Tim Packer. I've been fortunate enough to have a very, very successful career as an artist. Over the last 20 years, I've logged sales of several $1 million of my work, and that's been able to give me a lifestyle way beyond my wildest dreams. Now, in 2019, I had a very serious illness and I almost died a couple times. And what that led to was some very serious soul searching. And what I realized I wanted to dedicate the next portion of my life to is sharing everything I've learned about what it takes to be a successful artist with other aspiring artists. So let's get back to composition. Obviously, we can't be just using arrows and X's in our paintings to draw the viewer's eye and to move the viewer's eye. We have to use the marks and concepts that are available to us. Things like shapes, colors, values, textures, edges, harmony, contrast, things like this. We need to be able to use these marks to act like arrows to guide the viewer's eye, and in certain places like X's to hold the viewer's attention. We can choreograph the movement of the viewer's eye, creating that visual dance where we reach out, we stop them in their tracks, we draw them in, and we hold them in front of the painting as their eye caresses the various marks and elements we've placed on our canvas. Now, you can easily identify paintings that do this well, whether it's in a gallery or an art festival or a museum, not by looking at the paintings, but by looking at the viewers. Paintings like this will cause a choke point where all of a sudden the people going through get backed up because everybody is standing in front of the painting for several minutes. And what's happening is the artist has reached out, they've grabbed the viewer's attention, they've drawn them in, and then their eye is engaged in this visual dance. Now, I hope I'm getting through to you about the importance of composition, but it gets even better. So here's the great news. You can have a beautifully composed painting, so in terms of the way you've laid out the various shapes, colors, values, and edges, and you can just have a mediocre execution where the drawing isn't necessarily the best, the brushwork isn't necessarily the best, but as long as the composition is strong, the painting can still be very successful. And this is just like in music. You can have a beautifully composed song And it can be sung by a bunch of kindergarten kids with no training whatsoever, and it can still be quite beautiful. By the same token, you can have a poorly composed song, and not even Michael Bublé or Frank Sinatra or Adele can make it better without drastically changing the composition. And it's the same thing with your paintings. So here's the bad news. If you have a poor or weak composition, or if you've made even just a couple really bad choices at the beginning of the painting process, no amount of painting skill, drawing skill, brushwork, color knowledge, none of this stuff is going to be able to make that painting a success. So this is where not having a fundamental knowledge of composition gets really scary, because those decisions you make at the start of the painting, in terms of how you're going to divide the space, where you're going to place your major objects, how you're going to arrange your darks and lights, those are the most important decisions you'll make in the painting process. And make one or two mistakes at the very start of the painting, and then the painting is doomed to fail. And that's what really breaks my heart when I see artists slaving away at paintings, working on it for sometimes weeks because they just can't seem to make it work. And the problem is they made a couple really poor decisions at the beginning, and there's no amount of work that's going to make that painting successful without going in and radically painting over areas and changing some of those big decisions. So what can you do? You want to paint, you've been painting for years, but you don't really understand composition. Well, what I'd really encourage you to do if you're serious about your art is to actually make a commitment to dig deep and learn composition so that you can choreograph that dance for the viewer's eye. But in the meantime, I've created a PDF with what I consider to be the 10 most common weaknesses that I see in paintings. Now, I have a number of students in my mastermind course, Becoming a Successful Artist, and we do a lot of critiques, and I see a lot of the same mistakes being made over and over. And so simply by avoiding these mistakes, you're going to make sure that at least your painting has a chance that you can bring it to a successful finish, and you're not going to spend hours and hours or even days on a painting that was doomed because you made a couple or even one fatal error at the beginning of the painting process. So if you want to start creating better compositions and better paintings right now that have a better chance to sell, you can click on the link. I'll send you the 10 most common compositional weaknesses PDF. Now, when you click on the link, you're going to be asked to give me your name and email, and we're going to send you out the PDF. We'll also send you out a link to watch the module in the course, the 10 most common compositional weaknesses, and you'll get an opportunity to purchase the entire course at an amazing discount if you want. And you'll also be signed up for my newsletter. And that's something I just send out periodically to announce new YouTube videos, new courses, or special promotions. And you can also unsubscribe from that at any time simply by clicking on the unsubscribe button. So far, we've had over 500 students take my online course, Color and Composition, and the response has been like absolutely overwhelmingly positive. So while we get on to this next part of the video, I'm going to actually put some of the comments up there so you can see what people have said about the course and what an impact it has had on their work. Okay, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper now into kind of what composition is for those of you who are a little more serious about your art and about developing your ultimate potential. So composition is not merely a bunch of rules of do's and don'ts. It's kind of in between kind of a science and an art, and it's more like if you do A, the viewer's eye is likely to do B. What we ultimately want to grasp is what is the likely impact on the viewer if I make this mark or place this shape or create this gradation on the canvas? And is that something that I want the viewer's eye to do? And then if not, do I decide I'm not going to do that, or there are other things we can do to counteract that? Now that may sound kind of confusing, so let me put it into a real world example, and I'm going to just kind of relate back to a conversation I had recently with one of the students in my mastermind class. So we were talking about composition, and I was explaining to her this kind of stuff, and also was encouraging her to really kind of dig deep into composition. And she kind of admitted that she didn't really understand it. She said, like, well, I understand kind of a lot of the rules and know the rules, like you're never supposed to put your center of interest in the center of the painting and things like that. And I said to her, well, hang on, we need to stop right there, because the one thing I've learned about art is there's no such thing as never or always. It's the exceptions actually that kind of make the rule. And you need to understand not what the rule is, but the why behind the rule. So I actually said to her, no, that's not true. I've actually done a number of paintings with the center of interest right dead center that have been very successful paintings. And that's not understanding composition. That's just memorizing a bunch of rules. And the bad part about this is you might be missing the opportunity to create some absolutely amazing paintings because you're afraid to break the rules. Well, if you'll remember, Picasso famously said, learn the rules and then break them like a pro. Well, the only way to break them like a pro is to understand the why behind the rule. So let's look at the why behind the rule that says you should never put your center of interest in the center of the painting. More accurately, that should read, if you put the center of interest in the center of your painting, there are a couple things that could occur that could be detrimental to your painting or could actually be fatal to the composition. So the first one is what's called the bullseye effect. And so this is where the viewer's eye is just drawn right into the center. It stops there, but there's nothing to encourage the viewer's eye to move around the painting. And so the viewer just gets bored and leaves. This is also called the fried egg effect, where you just have the yolk with the big egg around it. But again, we want to have a center of interest that draws the viewer's eye, but we want it to also move around the painting. Well, if you place your center of interest dead center, it's much more likely that that could occur. So you need to do some things to make sure that doesn't happen. One thing you really want to avoid in this case is having symmetrical sides and top and bottom, because that will create the bullseye. Another thing that can happen if you have your center of interest in the center of the painting is it can split the painting in half, either vertically or horizontally, where it looks like, you know, there's maybe one good painting in the 2/3 of the left of the painting and another good 2/3 of the right of the painting, but they just don't seem to go together. It looks like there's one painting on one side, one painting on the other. That's not a good thing, because now the viewer doesn't know where to look. And whenever the viewer gets confused, they get a little anxiety that comes in, and that's not likely going to encourage someone to want to stand in front of your painting, or more importantly, to get out their wallet and take it home with them. So remember, what we want is to draw the viewer's eye into our painting, guide it to the center of interest, but then have it continually move around the painting, stopping in other places for a short period of time, coming back to the center of interest, and then moving around. So as long as your painting does that, doesn't matter whether the center of interest is dead center, if it's in the left, in the right, in the bottom, as long as it doesn't create those two potential weaknesses of a static composition or dividing your page in half. Now, when I explained this to her, she was like, okay, that all sounds well and good, but like, can you actually show me an example of a painting where the center of interest is in the dead center of the painting, but it's not a fatal error? And so that's what I'm going to talk about now. Now, if you're looking at the painting over my shoulder here, you'll see that the sun, which is the center of interest, is pretty close to dead center of the painting. Now, this is a painting that I just recently completed, and partly to kind of demonstrate this fact for this video. So it hasn't been out to see the light of day yet, it hasn't been viewed, but I have no doubt it will sell quickly. But I'm going to show you a number of other paintings that I've done where I've placed the center of interest in the center of the painting, and they've been very successful paintings. Now, you might ask, how do I know that they're very successful paintings? Well, again, we can tell a successful composition by how it impacts the viewer. So for me, a successful painting is a painting that was in a juried show, maybe won awards, or that sold very quickly. Because again, who decides if a painting is a good composition? It's not me. It's not some professor. It's not some art critic. It's the public. Because the whole idea behind composition is how it affects the people who view it. So if the public loves your painting, then you can say it's a successful painting. So let's look at a couple other examples. This is a painting that was done of one of my sons many, many years ago. Now, this is back when I was first starting out as a professional artist, and I actually didn't really know very much about composition. So I didn't know all this stuff I'm talking about now. I just knew that I really loved the image from the photograph. And what I can tell you now is all of those graphic shapes of the stars and stripes from his bathrobe, also the strong edges of the chair, that keeps your eye from just being drawn in and stopping. It moves it around the canvas. Now, how do I know this was successful painting? Well, this is actually a painting that was in the biggest, most prestigious show I've ever been in. This was back in 2000, and it was an open juried show called Aim for the Arts, put on by the Federation of Canadian Artists. At the time, it was the largest purse ever offered for an art contest. So the first prize was $25,000, and there was another $25,000 in prize money, and it attracted works from the top artists all over the world. Now, I didn't win an award for this, unfortunately, but I was thrilled to have it get in the show, and it sold right away. This is another painting on a motif that I've done a lot of, which is Lake Batiste, the early morning sunrise. And again, center of interest, very, very close to the center of the painting, but it works. And how do I know it works? This piece sold immediately the first time it was exhibited to the public, and it's become one of our most popular limited edition prints. And again, you can see the center of interest, dead center of the painting. And then finally, this one's a watercolor portrait that I did of my niece, again, many years ago, probably 25 years ago. This was when I was president of the Canadian Watercolor Society. And this painting actually was a demo that I did before an art group. And this was probably me painting in watercolor at the best I ever was. So I completed this painting start to finish in 2.5 hours. I just had the sketch penciled in, and I was able to do this in 2.5 hours. But if you look, that one eye of hers, the left eye, is dead center of the painting. That's what draws your attention, and the painting works. And how do I know it works? Well, I've heard over and over and over from people that this is one of their favorite of my watercolor portraits that I've ever done. And it's also one of my favorite pieces as well. And it also just blows my mind when I look at this that I did this in 2.5 hours. I haven't painted in watercolor now for about 15 years. I've moved to the water-soluble oils. And again, if I had been afraid to break the rules, I never would have even attempted this piece because of the fact that that dominant eye of hers is dead center of the painting. So all of these paintings, including the one behind my shoulder, they all break the rule, yet they all work. And they work because they don't create a static composition and they don't split the page in half. So this is only one of the rules that you'll find if you're actually just doing a checklist of things that you should avoid. But remember, the rules are there to be broken. What you want to learn is not just the rules, but the why behind the rule. And then you can make a judgment about whether or not that's happening to the detriment of your painting. So don't forget to click on the link if you want to get my free PDF, 10 most common compositional weaknesses. So you're gonna be asked to put in your name and email. We'll email you the PDF. And then you're gonna get a chance to actually watch that module from my online course, Color and Composition. And you'll get an opportunity to purchase the entire course at an amazing discount if you want. So just make sure that if you click on the link and you put in your name and your email and you're not getting these, check your spam filter, because we're going to be sending them out to you. And then you're going to have a limited time offer to purchase the course at an amazing discount. And if you want to see more courses that I have, you can go to my Art Academy at www.timpackerartacademy.com. I hope you found this helpful. And don't forget to check out my YouTube channel at Tim Packer Fine Arts. I've got tons and tons of content up there. I'm Tim Packer. I thank you for your time.